New product development is an extremely difficult thing to do. And I think about the reason why it's extremely difficult is that we think, and I think it's very much I don't know if it's self-centeredness that we all naturally have, which I think that is actually true, but it's where we think that we know what the market actually is and what it's about. And it doesn't matter. And it's interesting, right? Like I went into creating the reciprocity project and the reciprocity platform thinking that I understood how things operate because I read a whole bunch in the academic research about, how things work. And I thought, hey, this would be really, really easy. But, it's presumption. I think that there is a large disconnect between what is going on in the specific thing that you're looking at and the knowledge that we're capturing. So there's this general rule. If you are looking at and you do what's called regression analysis or a mathematical tool to look at variance or how different things are across a group, and in the social sciences, if you're explaining 20% or more of the difference between groups of things that you're looking at, then you're doing spectacularly well. So on the one side, you might say 20%, hey, that's great. But then on the other side, you're saying 80% of the stuff that's going on is unexplained. It is stuff that's just, I don't know what's going on, right? So um, it might get you halfway there to have a good understanding of what's going on, like at best. But then there's 50% that you have to get to before you actually sort of make any sort of traction. And so, what should you expect or what happens with new product development is absolutely nothing, right? Like you should come into it knowing that what you're doing is going to be a complete flop. And your base case scenario is that this is going to be a failure and this is not going to work out in your favor. If you come into it in that sort of way, and so this requires a different logic of thinking about the world, right? So, um, on one hand, right, the logic that is taught often in business school is to think about, you know, um, thinking about maximizing profit, thinking about, how do you actually get to some sort of success. The opposite is actually the truth. It's thinking about you're going to fail and how do you minimize the amount of failure that you're going to have. And then um, it's not about it's not about getting to success, but is figuring out how do I deal with the majority of the time that I'm actually going to have failure, and the majority of the time that nothing is going to work out in my favor. And it's a completely different logic. It requires you to really flip things on your head. And the truth is that we don't talk about that because nobody likes that story, right? We don't like to dwell on these sort of feelings of I'm not good enough, this is problematic, like this is not going to work out. And the truth is we like to focus on that one successful individual or successful company that actually made it rather than what the majority actually does. And the majority is that things just don't work out, right? The vast majority, 80%, going back to those numbers, don't work out with what you thought it was going to be. So what do you do then, right? So one side of it is to come into it knowing that you're really not knowing anything, right? And so you can try to learn and try to do like little things that sort of ratchet up the percentage. But I don't think most of the time you're ever going to ratchet up that percentage a lot in terms of sort of success rates, right? Um, At most you might go from 20 to 40% of increasing your success rate at any given moment. And that might take a long time, right? You might take 6 months, it might take you a year, probably longer to get to those sort of success rates, however you're measuring it, right? Whether it's retention, whether it is people feeling happy about the thing that you have. So it's not a big jump, right? So a big part of what you need to do is to work on how you're going to process and deal with the fact that things are not going to work out in your favor, right? So it's thinking about, how do I know that I'm spending something, money, resources, on things that are going to be a flop? Like, dealing with that process and that logic is more important than thinking about, I'm actually going to work on something that is going to be very, very successful. um, Dealing with, how do I build that into a team, that it's okay to work on things that are going to be a flop. And the issue is, it's hard to understand what is going to be successful. We know sort of basic things, using some of the logic that we know, having a good team together, sort of basic things like that. um, those matter, right? Like, those matter and they make a difference, but it doesn't necessarily make all of the difference. And so you need to, like, think about what it is that we're going to do in order to keep going, to make sure that I feel good about this thing. And it's me, right? Like, you have to think, I as in me as in you, like, you as an individual, how you're going to process this. So if things don't work out, what do we do? Right? Like, how do we deal with this? What is it? Do we internalize this thing and start processing, which is almost all of us will do, right? We tend to internalize things. We set negative things. We say, this is my fault. And, we go through that rabbit hole, which I've done many times before. You've probably done the same thing. Um, but where you need to sort of take a step back and say, hey, wait a minute, this is okay. I am going to be fine in this circumstance. And that's where you need to think about how you're going to set yourself up to be fine. Um, and then allow yourself to just kind of try things, right? You will see, most businesses don't do that because it's hard to try things and explore and find those kind of things, because you're going to fail most of the time, right? So you're going to go to the tried and true, which is great. And, I highly recommend that, to go to the tried and true, what you know exists. But then you're never going to find that sort of sweet spot that sometimes things just work out and it clicks and you figure it out, right? So with the reciprocity project, as I'm doing this and farting around and playing around with things, I never know what the right answer is. And I need to frame it in my mind of, like, okay, this is a loss. I'm going to waste a bunch of money on this thing and it's probably not going to work out. But so what? Right? Like, I got to figure out, how am I going to deal with that so I'm okay with building this thing and being just like, so what? Right? So, um, a lot of it in my head is framing it as, this is charity. Framing it as like, I'm playing around. This is a hobby. This is fun. I'm exploring the world. Right, thinking about things, and thinking about, like, hey, I need to figure out what this is. And if everything kind of like goes to crap, right, and I've lost a certain amount of money, I kind of think about it in my head, right? So I've already spent about $100,000 on it, plus time, my time and effort and all that kind of stuff. So I think about it in my head as, how much would I spend if I did fishing as a hobby, right? And fishing, that's what I probably would have done, right? It's deep in my family, fishing or hunting. And I think about how much that costs. It's expensive to buy a nice boat. My sister has a great big boat, which I'm sure it's very expensive, right? All those kind of things is very expensive, and yet I'm trying to play around, and that's the way I'm framing, I'm not thinking about like, hey, I am going to be successful, because as soon as I get in that logic, I get very pity party right away and I feel bad about myself. But if I say, hey, I'm just playing around, I don't know what I'm doing anyways, let's just see what happens. Let's fart around as long as we possibly can. I might stumble into something because I just don't know, right? Like I wish I knew all the answers up front, but man, that would not be life, would it? So I don't know, and I'm just going to fart around until something clicks. And, something is clicking right now. I'm sort of figuring out a way. Hey, um, how can I create a system that creates a non-rejectable research paper and makes everybody feel fun when they actually do it and excited and they have a great time? How can I actually do that? How can I democratize science and research compared to what it is now? When I say that, that makes a little bit more of a difference and people can see it. But that took me years to actually start using that language and come to it. It wasn't something that was easy to figure that out, and that required a little bit of here, a little bit of there, of getting inspiration until I figured it out. So I would just encourage you, when you do something and you're creating a new product, innovation, whatever, don't get hung up on that this thing is going to be successful unless it's proven, unless you're doing a business like you're going to cut grass, um, which is more proven than not. And you're in a location where that's good, or you're in a very snowy location, or you want to do babysitting or whatever, right? Like something that is proven, don't expect it to ever work, and it's up to you to figure out, and it's going to take an awful lot of resources to get to the point where it actually does start working for you. That's all I want to say. All right, take care and have a wonderful day.